Well, that was Katie Watson. With me here in the studio is Pablo Navarrete, a British-Chilean film director who's worked extensively in Venezuela. Peter, welcome here to the programme. For someone who's worked so much in Venezuela, how difficult has it been watching the events of the last few days?
I mean, I think it's distressing for anyone to see large amounts of people having to leave their country. I mean, I lived in Venezuela for 2 years. I have family in Venezuela. I've covered the country. I've made documentaries about the country. I think it's obviously distressing. There is a very real economic crisis in the country. There is a lot of people that are leaving. I mean, migration to Colombia particularly has risen dramatically, and to the rest of Latin America, from about 89,000 to 900,000. So it is distressing, but I think in covering the story, we need to look at all the drivers of this crisis and what's leading people to leave the country.
I'll come to that in just a second, but you mentioned family. I gather you still have family there. Have you had communication conversations about how difficult life actually is with the sort of hyperinflation we're talking about?
No, I mean, hyperinflation and the other shortages make life very, very difficult. I speak to my family regularly. You know, they're very distressed about the situation. Some are more hopeful than others. I have lots of friends, some in Caracas, who are more hopeful. My family live in an island off the mainland, which has suffered perhaps more through shortages. So yes, I mean, I think there's a variety of perspectives. Some are more hopeful than others. Specifically in Caracas, I have friends who are still planning, getting on with life. Life goes on, you know.
I'll come to these pictures in the border because you filmed and documented all of that at the border as well, but you talked about what lies behind it. What else lies behind it other than the obvious that this is a crisis of the government's own making?
I think there is a level of mismanagement by the government that has to be recognised. But I think there's a very important political dimension to this crisis, which is not covered very much in the mainstream media. I think there's a domestic component, which is the domestic opposition's refusal to really respect the democratic outcomes of Venezuelan elections. And added to that is the role of the US, which has been exacerbated under Trump, under the financial sanctions, which make any resolution to Venezuela's economic crisis almost impossible.
Which brings us to those border pictures, and you've been there yourself. You've seen those people leaving. Do you see any way out? Because the situation, even the numbers, seems to be getting worse and worse and worse.
I mean, my parents are from Chile. I remember Richard Nixon said that under Allende in the 70s, the idea was to make the economy scream. I think the Venezuelan economy is screaming. I think the sanctions, the financial sanctions, which are illegal under international law, have to be reviewed. The support by the EU to these sanctions have to be reviewed. If we really care for the welfare of Venezuelan people, we should at least be contributing to a resolution and not fanning the flames of conflict and misery.
And coming back to the people, to the hyperinflation, people in the conversations you've had, do they think these drastic moves around the currency, lopping off 5 zeros, will actually work? I was talking to an expert on the programme only yesterday, Professor Hankey, who'd actually advised a previous Venezuelan president. He described it to me on the programme as like having a facelift. Underneath, the thing is exactly the same. It won't solve it.
Well, I think everyone hopes that the economic situation will improve. I think I mean, it remains to be seen whether it's credible that the government has, you know, this floating exchange rate against the petro. It's a floating currency. The petro doesn't really exist as such. It can't be traded. I think it's problematic, but we hope that there's a resolution to the economic woes that the country is facing. But I'll go back to the issue. If from the outside we want to help Venezuelans, we must stop or lobby against these really cruel financial sanctions being imposed by the Trump administration.
Okay, Pablo Navarrete, thank you very much for coming in and talking to me. Thank you so much.